What's up, you guys? It's Maura. Sorry I sound kind of funny today. I'm just getting over COVID, and I've been sick for the past 3 weeks. First, starting with a bad cold and like sinus issues. Then it turned into a week of laryngitis, and me not being able to speak. And now it's COVID. So I wanted to start filming some more regular content to put onto like my Instagram and my YouTube to be more engaging and present in like the composer and songwriter community, and to also be better help to other people, like sharing tips and suggestions and stuff like that. So that's gonna be kind of what I'm doing. I'm gonna be talking about various different things around the process of songwriting and writing pieces, also different like softwares that I've tried and that I would recommend, and also like different equipment, things you can do, and just a lot of important things. We'll also eventually get into like copywriting and licensing your music, so that way you can get paid fairly for all of your royalties and for any time that someone uses your music or purchases your music or anything like that. A lot of this stuff I'm still in the very early stages going through myself, but I figured that it would be helpful to share some of my experience with all of you guys, because we're all at different levels and areas of our journey in our craft. I also want to make this more open to suggestions about what other people would like to see or hear from my channels or from my reels and stuff like that. What are some things that you guys would like to see or that you would like to learn how to do? Whether it's writing, whether it's teaching, because I'm getting more experience with that, like teaching vocals and drums and stuff like that. Copyright, licensing under like ASCAP and BMI, selling your music, even design. I do my own cover art for my scores and for my SoundCloud stuff, and YouTube thumbnails and all that too. So we could talk about like YouTube presence, networking, any of that sort of thing. I'm dealing with all of this all at the same time that you guys are, so we can go through it together. At first I thought we could get into a discussion about how do you write music, whether that's songwriting, whether that's writing pieces for band or for orchestra or electronic pieces, which I've dabbled in a little bit as well. How do you go about writing? Like, I have so many, well, not just me, like in general, there are just like so many people who come around to composers and to artists asking like, how do you do it? Like, you must just have like a natural talent, which is like, maybe part of that's true. Like, I definitely owe all of my musical abilities to God, and it certainly, I don't always feel like it all comes from me, you know, it comes from God. Whatever's being placed on my heart, it comes from the teachers and the peers I'm surrounded with, or the circumstances of the world. But it's not all just about that. It's about finding your process and your way of going about things. I really believe that anybody can do anything that they put their mind to. You can write a song or a piece if you really put your mind to it, and if you're passionate about it, and if you have a story that you want to share. That's how I would start the song. I need a deep breath. Oh my gosh, my voice is like so worn out. My throat feels tight, and it's like I have to breathe so much more often. So the first step that I've found to be most helpful and to be most true to who I am is to find that passion. Find that message that you want to share. Don't go right to, oh, I want it to be piano, I want it to be this, I want it to be a 30-piece orchestra piece, or I want it to be like this super complex max patch, or this Logic session that has 100 tracks and it's gonna be like the next best song on the radio or Spotify or whatever. Get all that out of your head. Don't think about instrumentation, don't think about form, don't think about anything. Think about, where do you want to start? What is the message that you want to share? What's on your heart? Because a lot of times I've found, like, when I think about the things that are important to me in this moment, or what exactly the story is that I want to tell that's true to me, it satisfies me so much more in the end, and I feel it just has so much more value to me than just this like thing that I regurgitated out because of the deadline, you know? Just find what speaks to you, whether that's a certain lyric or a word that comes to your mind, a person, a place, an event, a thing. This applies to songwriting, it applies to writing instrumental music, electronic music, anything that you're putting your heart and your passion into. Find like what's in your heart, what is it that you want to share with the world. It may seem super vague and super complicated, but like that's the best place to start. Sometimes I revert to like journaling out my ideas. I've actually been doing that a lot this year for all of my compositions, even my instrumental ones. Just writing out my plans, like what do I have in mind, what's my image in my head. And a lot of times I'll just start writing like a lot of emotional words and like backstory types of things. Next thing you know, hey, I'm writing a song about world unity coming out of COVID, just like Song for the World. Or I'm writing a piece about my experiences with mental health and my different struggles that people don't see, like confessions. Or think of somebody else that's not me. I'm writing a piece about insecurity and wanting to be seen, but having to let all of that go and remembering that God sees me, like my super talented aunt Barbara Ann Holmes. Shout out. Like, just think about what comes from your heart. What is it that you want to share with the world? You can go back and a lot of times I'll also go back and listen to songs and pieces that I have enjoyed, usually ones that I've grown up with, like inspiring music by like the Beatles and by Queen and Michael Jackson and stuff like that, or different musical theater and stuff like that, or I love pieces by like Danny Elfman and Eric Whitacre. I'll go back and listen to a lot of my favorite artists, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's taking inspiration and going back to your roots. Just find that inspiration, find that message in your heart that you want to share with the world. Stick around for part 2. Part 2 to how do you write music, including songs, pieces, electronic music, anything like that. So, in the previous segment, we talked about finding your inspiration and finding the message that you want to share through your work. Because if you don't start with that, your work might not be as authentically true or meaningful to you in the end. The next step that I found actually really helps me is to start small. If you're writing a piece for, wanting to write a piece for a band or something like that, or heck, you're wanting to write a piece and you have like hundreds of instruments to choose from, but you don't know what you want to go with yet. Staring at a huge blank empty score is with like, a whole orchestra or band waiting to be written for is so overwhelming. Same with a giant Logic session with like hundreds or thousands of different sound libraries. Sorry, I use Logic normally. No hate against other digital audio workstations, but Logic's my favorite. But thousands of sound libraries to choose from and plugins and stuff too. It's overwhelming. So don't overwhelm yourself right away. Start small. I've even, over the past year, my professor, Dr. Bacon, has recommended a couple times that I start at the piano instead of starting right at the computer. And it's actually really helped me a lot. It's helped me to come up with the melodic material and the form that I want for the song or the piece before I start worrying about what instrument do I want? Is this the right color? Is this the right timbre? Is this what do I, all of these different things that get in the way of the big picture that you're looking for first. Start small. If I'm like writing a piece that I'm notating for instruments, so usually I'll either start at the piano or I'll just start with one single instrument. I'll start with like a MIDI piano, or I'll start with something that I am very familiar with, that I enjoy the sound of, like vibraphone or marimba, because I'm a percussionist and I love keyboards. Start small. Or if I'm, for example, if I'm doing like a recording project, sometimes I'll just start with only an audio track where I can sing and record the sounds that I'm looking for right from my head, right then and there, like you're recording yourself thinking in the moment. Or same thing, I'll just play everything starting with a piano, maybe I'll throw in a drum set or something like that. But don't overwhelm yourself right away, because I've done that so many times. I did that with my one piece that I've ever written for band in high school that was fine for the level that I was at in high school, but when I look back on it, I'm like, that is so cringe. Why? Because I overwhelmed myself. I started with the whole blank band score. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was a percussionist. I knew nothing about like wind, instruments, articulations, slurs, anything like that. I'm like, you just hit the instrument. That's what I know as a high school percussionist. So like, yeah, I overwhelmed myself with a bunch of things, like instrument choices, and also instruments that I was not familiar with, and I didn't really take the time to ask people, hey, how do you write for this? Or is this possible, kind of thing. So moral of the story, start small. If you're a songwriter, I suggest just starting with one single vocal track where you're singing, or you're playing and singing with your instrument of choice. Just recording yourself thinking in the moment. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just record everything so that you don't forget, and then you can start to piece everything together. Similar thing with scoring. Start small. Either start at the piano or start with one instrument and then build from there once you have, all of the meat and potatoes that you want. So yeah, second step, start small before you get bigger and get into the nitty-gritty details. And make sure you come back for part 3. So now we're on to part 3. Now, this is kind of where we get into like the experimental, like big back and forth, like storyboard section. Because this is where you'll, after you've kind of found all of your basic material, the basic like form kind of structure, it doesn't have to all be there, because things are gonna change. They always do, like when you start adding stuff in. But once you found all of the basic material, then you could start adding in the extra instruments or whatever it is that you want. And this is where it can get kind of overwhelming. So this is what I would suggest. Find subcategories so you know that, and this is universal across almost all types of music. Probably all types of music, whether it's instrumental, whether it's a vocal, whether it's like pop music, you're always gonna have some kind of rhythm, whether it's like rhythm that's trickled in between the parts, or whether it's like an actual like rhythmic section, like percussion, drums, stuff like that. You're always gonna have some kind of foundation, like some kind of foundational bass line or bass section, probably. You're always gonna have melody, and I don't want to say a melodic section, because I really don't like labeling certain instruments or certain voices or certain things as melodic all the time. Like, in instrumental music, it's like always flutes, always trumpets, getting the melody. Mix it up a little bit. But obviously, if you want trumpets and flutes to have the melody, then by all means, go for it. So you have the melody, and then you have harmony that you can also share among parts. But let me talk about this in a singer-songwriter fashion first, because this is kind of just building the basic foundation. But yeah, when you're writing like a song, you have your drums or your percussion, You have your bass, which is usually just a bass. Sometimes it's like some other type of string. Sometimes it's the left hand of the piano or something like that. Then you have your melody, which is usually the vocals. Then you have your harmony, which is usually additional vocals. And then you have like other harmonic and supporting elements there, like guitar, piano, extra strings. You know, they kind of like fill things in and make the two different, like melody, bass, drums, all kind of more connected together, if that makes sense at all. Because each instrument, each section holds a purpose, but then they hold a greater purpose altogether. So, and that's kind of the same approach that you could start with for writing like band and orchestra music or choir music, musical theater, anything like that too. Like start with subcategories, come up with one motif, one line for each section. For drums, you can come up with, you know, some easy rhythm, like I could probably be demonstrating on this, and maybe I will. Bass, come up with one, you know, 4-beat pattern. Piano, come up with one 4-beat pattern. Melody, come up with one 4-beat, like, melodic line. Doesn't even have to have lyrics yet or anything, or make sense yet. Yeah, so start with subcategories, and then as you start building and developing those parts even more, see how you can make them interconnected. Like, maybe, oh, here, for a second, I'm gonna give the bass the melody, and it's gonna sound like boom, ba-doom, da-da-da, something like that. Or, like, for a second, the drums are gonna drop out, and it's just gonna be the strings, or everything else is gonna drop out, it's just gonna be drums, we're gonna have a little drum break, you know, something like that. Find little areas where all the parts can be interconnected, can maybe pass certain ideas back and forth, and or also some places where you could just, you know, take people by surprise. It's called, as a old instructor of mine said to me, it's like little earworms, like things that people weren't necessarily expecting, but that aren't unpleasant. So like a drum break or something like that, or if you know, I'll try to bridge back into like scoring and orchestration world. Dissonant chord kind of out of nowhere, but it's related to the previous and the upcoming chord, something like that. This part of the process takes the longest. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of revision, and also great thing to do, a lot of asking people to listen and asking for advice, because I always learn time and time again that I am not the best or the most knowledgeable person at everything. That's why it's great to have friends and collaborators and and mentors and people who are willing to help you out. This is the big experimental part. Go out there and explore the many possibilities. Alright. So, part 4. This is just going to kind of be like a little wrap up. So we've gotten through the big part of our process. We've figured out our material, we've figured out like our instrumentation, we've figured out the structure and how we want the song to go. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details with this next part because you could totally get into like a separate series, which I will because I want to, because I'm a nerd and because I love you all. There may be some like small imperfections with your project. Maybe in your scoring, you're not exactly sure how, like you have all of the melodic material, all of the things that you want, but you don't exactly know how to notate some things, or you want to find a way to make your score clean and as marketable and as readable as possible for players and for conductors, people who are going to be looking at this. Or say you're doing a recording project or you're writing a song. You've got all of your vocals recorded, you've got all of your instruments there, the song is basically there, but there's some small like details and little things that you want to fix. Like maybe there's some things you want to do to boost your voice, or maybe there's extra noise in your recording that you want to cancel out or something like that. Or you want to make the MIDI instruments because because you don't know how to play everything and you don't have enough money to hire musicians who do, sound more realistic by adding things like velocity and pedal, like automated stuff like that. That's a whole nother thing that we could get into, actually two separate things we could get into, and I probably know more about the recording side than the engraving scores professionally side. But yeah, so that's a whole process of engraving your scores, cleaning them up, and then in terms of like the recording projects, like mixing and mastering your projects so that you get the clean sound that you want. And then once all of that is done, you skip past all that, it's all done, you've had other people look at it or go through it and stuff. Register your music for copyright and register your music for licensing under a pro, whether that's ASCAP or BMI or some other organization. I know that there are more. I'm signed under ASCAP because that's what worked for me, or at least it was easier for me to figure out. For some reason I couldn't find where to do it on BMI. I don't know. This is also something that we can get into later on, but I could just say it right here. ASCAP is pretty nice because when you register, you pay one time, you fill out the application, and then you can either register as an artist only, you can register as a publisher only, which means that you're representing other artists, or you're you basically help to write or produce other projects. Or you can register as both, which is what most independent artists and composers do, which is what I did, where you get usually if you sign up for one or the other, you only get 50% payment for the royalties, but if you apply as both, you get 100%, which is worth it. And then basically what royalties are, that's money earned for every time that someone has performed your music live or has used your music under certain circumstances. I don't think it includes educational, so like school concerts and stuff. I don't believe so, because you're licensed under that pro, and because your songs and your pieces are registered there, they like reach out to ASCAP and say, hey, like I used this person's song, or we performed this person's piece. Usually doesn't cost licensees, like the people who use the music, money. At least I know for like band directors or choir directors who are playing in concerts and stuff. But then that money comes from ASCAP to you directly as the artist, and they don't hold any percentage of the profit from you. Yes, if you're using other people's music, please tell them, so that artists and composers can get paid and publishers can get paid. But anyway, so that's basically how pros work. And then registering your music for copyright, it's kind of a hassle and it takes forever for them to get back to you and process your application, but it's worth it. It's just because they have so much to go through. You go to the US Copyright Office website, you fill out the application. I can't remember specifically what one it is, but I can remember because I've done it plenty of times. And then you just fill out the application, submit your audio file and your score or whatever you have, and then if it gets accepted, then your piece or your song is registered for copyright, which means that if anyone tries to steal your work, you can't hold them accountable. It is there. You have it in writing that it is yours and it belongs to you. It's just like a sort of extra protection. And yeah, so anyways, that was a long tangent, but yeah, fourth and final step is going through like cleaning up your project, whether that's mixing and mastering or engraving, things like that, and then copyright and licensing your music. And then we can also get into marketing and music presentation in a whole nother thing, but I need a break first.